Hello and welcome to your Wednesday evening weirding session. I'm your host, C. Savory, creator of Fractal Praxis. I don't know about you, but I think my way into knowledge. It is always a living process, called stream of consciousness in written or flow in spoken forms. It is a dynamic synthesis in the moment, drawing upon the full body of awarenesses I've ever encoded and encapsulated. My mind is like a network, a web, perhaps like the linkage of waterways, lakes, rivers, tributaries, aquifers, unified in one system. Fractal expressions of the water's movement. Good thinking nourishes an organism just like waterways flow to nourish numerous creatures far and wide. My mind is a garden of observations and interactions, just like we learn about in permaculture. What my thinking is not is a linear structure. It is not a ladder, but a lattice. Not a master outline, but a matrix. Intersectional, co-constituted, whole, and certainly self-referential. Very much like a living organism. Not like the dead blocks bugs' bodies get pinned to for the academic archives. Still, my knowledge is valid. Immensely so. That I've drawn at least as heavily on carefully analyzed lived experiences as I have on intellectual texts makes it only that much more valid and valuable, for it is a holistic methodology of knowledge that I promote. So in my evocative natural style today, I am speaking of how I've struggled lately. I wouldn't really rather become an academic than continue blossoming as the Gnostic witch that I am. Yet I felt it was clearly time to work on my claims, strengthen them, and make them more public, i.e. publicize them. I must do my philosophy justice. It has served my life's evolution so significantly. I believe it can bring great benefits to all the people once certain insights of its are shared. But it can't be built like a math test, boxed up into linear lectures. Instead, like this piece, penned all in one sitting, it must flow from my in-balance aliveness to spark and cascade processes of your own. So from which angle, using which tools and tactics, might I unfurl the threads of and reduce something whole and alive in a way that you can share in? I'm struggling with this. Until I thought to start from the beginning again and sit with, what are my goals for Fractal Praxis? Here's the thing. Fractal praxis is language that best describes a belief system, a belief that I've arrived at over the course of 2 decades. Specifically, the belief that we are life, and so we ought to act like it. As elegant a statement as that is, there's actually a great deal to unpack there, and that is fractal praxis. Like a fractal, yes, we are life, and we ought to act like it. That's the belief under the label fractal praxis. But what I'm really after here with this work is not creating a thesis paper or any such conceptual construct. What I'm really after here is extending a culture that I've developed within myself and for my own benefit holistically into the collective sphere. For this piece and for all of my work, it helps if you think of an individual's internal worldview and a collective or societal culture as having the same nature. The only term I've ever encountered that collapses both of these concepts under one phenomenology is cognitive structure in Jeremy Lent's book, The Patterning Instinct. But for the rest of this piece, I'm going to use the term culture a lot to really get you to situate in and think about this in terms of culture. I'm here to invoke a culture of people who consciously align with the principles and processes of life for their own benefit, too. I seek to catalyze and co-participate in the already emergence of a culture of people who feel enlivened to let go old, shallow, ill-suited notions of self in favor of a self so much grander, a self inclusive of and belonging to all of us and us all, life as a system. The joy in finding such coherence, in finding our unique place in the wisdom and our unique stake in the whole picture. I want a culture that seeks to synthesize truth as well as propagate it, including by embodying it more fully, thus properly representing or representing truth in the world. I want a culture that actually knows that the purpose of our body minds, as wired by the brilliant universe, very much so, is to synthesize truth, internalize adaptive models, and survive and thrive by these. That this is just a fractal of life writ large. We can do this fractal at any scale, and it benefits us. And through this flexible mechanism, enormous good can be accomplished, including healing the wrongs and harms of ancestral legacies, like colonialism and supremacist worldviews, and even healing the harms caused to the environment, to the ecology of our planet. By filtering for and centering the truth through relationship, we liberate what life wants to be and can be through us. Relationship is the ultimate measure of our success. It's about appropriately configuring all the patterns of ourselves and letting the right potentials express. When I speak of relationship, I don't just mean between nations or between individuals or between communities. I also mean between the concepts wired into your mind, into your worldview, which gets projected out onto the world and which becomes the basis of your interactions with the world and the results you get from those interactions. That is, relationship extends fractally into all domains. And for those of us colonized, being brought up in a separation and supremacy-based ideology, this will seem so obscure and perplexing as to seem impossible, when it is in fact the singular fractal route back to sanity and to having an umbrella of wellness that can harbor and encompass and benefit us all. It won't be like fixing or sustaining the old world. It will be like inventing a new world, unprecedented, founded on newly distilled and articulated understandings that can be easily mimetically spread and that make everything simpler and more whole without reducing it, and thus ineluctably compelling to any sentient being. I'm speaking of unity through understanding, which can only ever bring us back to life. And the process of reunification with who and what we are will assuredly bring about irresistible coherence, ease, plentifulness, and harmony. For us, for our descendants, and arguably for our ancestors. Yes, I radically claim that all karma, all harm, all cognitive dissonance is theoretically unifiable through this fractal methodology, that all patterns constituting this universe are theoretically understandable by these mechanisms. And these powers and potentials are in fact baked right into our very existence. The problem is only that we are so out of touch with our existence, with who and what we are. It is so obscured from us who and what we really are because of being enculturated in ways that teach us that we are something else or that we ought to be something else. And so we must wield the machete of mind through discernment, through exquisite, skillful thinking, to hack our way through the jungle of noise, to get to the signal once more, the signal of life as it surges through us and around us, and let the encounter with truth, with signal, reorganize us as it's meant to do. A culture that seeks and promotes truth, which is work undertaken through relationship essentially, this is the culture I want more of around me. This is the culture I want, indeed, surrounding me in all directions by the time I perish from this earth. I've long suffered the notion that I needed to pull away from people, from society, from culture, in order to develop an original coherent philosophy, forging a new culture, in part through the fires of my necessary alienation from less true, less functional worldviews, that is, popular culture, and the ways that we've all internalized that and ourselves then become stunted and stymied in our processing of this world and in our metastructures of this world. So yes, some of that pulling away has been necessary for me to become so differentiated. But there's a kind of blind spot, a kind of ignorance that I personally have found pervading my personal life. And it's a generalized avoidance of relationship. This is a pattern I've encountered in many ways, in many forms. It has really shaped my life. But it's a bias so deeply rooted, formed in such early childhood and perhaps even ancestrally, that it is so hardwired into my existence that it's extremely hard to uproot and to overcome or to change the patterning of. Nevertheless, I believe that any pattern that limits thriving can be addressed through my method, which I have referred to as Fractal Praxis. And I continue to be its top student. I continue to apply these methods in my own life. So lately, I've come to see that the next project for me, as far as patterns it is my duty to integrate in the world, is to overcome this avoidance of relationship, this generalized avoidance of relationship that subtly keeps the world out of balance, a la Koyaanisqatsi. It's as if I'm doing all of this tension, this effort, this surface tension work to try to hold back my culture from infiltrating yours and your culture from infiltrating mine. But that's ultimately pointless. Eventually, the culture I've developed internally must belong to all people who will harvest from these very methods. It must belong to all practitioners everywhere. There's a certain point at which it can no longer be my pet idea, even despite my indeed original efforts to synthesize and clarify these truths in this distinctive way. Instead, what I've been doing all along, and which I now have a language for, is I've been developing a culture of one, a way of systematically interacting with the world that brings about great harvests. I've been developing this culture of one, but I've been failing to advocate for this culture and failing to influence others with my culture. I guess I internalized a belief that no one wanted to receive or could receive what I had to offer. So I never sought influence. I never sought to promote or advocate the beliefs I so strongly hold. And that's the essence of the breakdown in the universe that I need to rectify. That's what must change from now on. From now on, I see that it is my duty to call upon the potential to create a collective culture of which I would just become one thread in a tapestry, one practitioner among many, one gem in Indra's net. Please belong to life with me. Belong to this culture that reinforces and expands upon life's praxis in the universe and gives you the most meaningful possible place to occupy with your existence for the rest of your life. Come home to life with me. Yes, I've differentiated and I've become distinct through my efforts, but these efforts bear fruits that I want to invite you into the harvest. So let's let the floodgates open to anyone and everyone feeling called to join me in these efforts so that I am not alone. And likewise, all of you will become less alone through this way too. I can assure you. Thank you so much for listening and reading. I encourage all of you to subscribe at blog.fractalpraxis.com for more content like this. Thank you for your support. Blessed be. Until next week.